Hi, my name's Dave Price from the True Life Business Show. And today we've got a very special guest, Peter Burke from A Fairer Society. Peter, how are you doing, sir?
I'm very good. Nice to meet you, Dave. Great to be here.
Good to meet you as well. I've had a quick look into your website actually, so I've got a rough idea of what you do, but really intrigued to find out more. Um, but first of all, the first question we always kick off with on these is, how do you help other people?
Oh, that's a great question. How do I help other people? So, really, what we're all about is how we help people navigate the process of things that matter to them, such as housing or energy or local politics or food. Is that kind of how we containerize a group of people who've got a shared purpose or interest, but really don't know how the industry or sector works? So we're very much like a kind of facilitation and support and guidance, always at the end of the phone, always on Zoom, but kind of supporting groups to kind of come together and take control of things that matter to them.
Right. It's a big old subject you've got there.
Certainly is, certainly is.
Would it help? I mean, how did you get in? What's the background to A Fairer Society? How did it all start?
So my background was kind of like charity and social enterprise for many years. Then, because I was helping so many projects in my social enterprise, I sort of fell into finance, like helping projects raise the money to do their work. And it kind of spiraled from there, really, in that I latterly, I mean, I helped a lot of projects do a lot of different financing, but in the main, it was a lot of property projects towards the end. And I kind of peeked behind the curtain a little bit as to how they developers did it. And that's kind of up to them. But I always felt like there was a kind of there was always a kind of cutting of quality or the green agenda or technology in the housing that I felt we needed for profit and just for profit. And really what my kind of vision was to change that everyone can still earn money, everyone can still do well, but we like really stick to something that is of quality and is going to you know stay with the test of time. So yeah, that was it was kind of one thing. I always wanted to do property, but I didn't know how or what part of property I wanted to be involved in. So that was kind of the big step for me. And then it's just evolved into other kind of cooperative group processes, really.
Right. I was going to say, when you say a project, is there a sort of a classic example of a project you worked on that you could give us?
Yeah, so we took the step quite early on to look at co-housing and co-living. So really it's about the it's about the community element of developing these kind of projects. So they're standard, they're standard housing projects, or they're standard, buy to let type housing projects. But really what we do is we put the community on top. And that's kind of like our project development, if you like. So we are all about the kind of the legal and the governance and the kind of financial elements of how these groups operate and come together. Because if it's you or I, it's a lot easier to make decisions because it's just you or I making a decision, maybe a team of people. But when it's a group of people who are kind of emotionally and financially invested in the project, there's a lot of different ideas and different things that need to come about. So we really kind of hold that decision-making process and help groups make the best decision rather than just stay stuck, and not go anywhere. So yeah, that's kind of the main part of the projects we do, is the communal kind of community-led element of housing.
Right. So this is helping pull everybody together to get that joint goal. So I mean, I'm assuming we're talking about sort of small developments, very eco-friendly type properties, that sort of thing. You mentioned co-living and co-housing in there. Can you actually expand on what you mean by that? Because I'm not sure if I quite, if my definition would be the same as yours.
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting because most people don't really know it exists. I mean, co-housing is something that's quite big now in well, it originated in Denmark, or it was kind of the phrase of co-housing came from kind of Scandinavia, most parts of Europe, America, Australia, all have quite a lot of co-housing projects. Co-housing really is about, it's about community, it's about sharing, but you've got your own house, you've got your own property, your own front door, but you know, cars are parked on the outside. There's this kind of real kind of intentionality in terms of how you work as a neighborhood. So that's co-housing. Co-living really is, it's a house share, you know, it's kind of been taken on quite a lot in city centres, especially places like London, where, you know, you've got kind of big apartment blocks, but basically you've got a room or a studio and then lots of shared facilities. So our definition of co-living really is how we can bring a community or a lifestyle around community into kind of smaller, but, you know, traditional kind of 4, 5, 6 bed houses, you know, traditionally an HMO in the marketplace, and really bring that communal element so the groups of people feel like they're living in a, you know, a family unit. And that's not for everybody, we know that, but at the same time, you know, our marketing so far tells us there's enough people who do want that.
As you said, the HMO, as I know, or the house of multiple occupation. So is there a difference between that and what you're saying on the co-living? Is it the same thing?
It's ultimately the same concept, yeah. You know, the house of multiple occupation, where you've got, you know, individuals who are renting the room and therefore sharing the other facilities in the house. The difference of what we're trying to do with this is very similar to all the other kind of housing projects we're involved in. We're bringing that community of people together earlier, so they're kind of moving in together. It could be a group of friends, or it could be a group of strangers, but ultimately it's helping them find that shared purpose and interest, so they can live a little, you know, live more connected, and not feel alone. You know, loneliness is a big problem in the UK these days. So, you know, we're really trying to kind of focus on how the work we do integrates people into those communities, so they don't feel so alone.
Right, got ya. And it's the development side of it that I'm really interested in. So, yeah, could you talk us through a specific example of a development you've been involved in?
Yeah, so is that on the co-housing or the co-living specifically, or both?
And more the co-housing side of it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we've got one project so far, which is buying, it's a farm that's partly being converted, but there's obviously planning gain to grow that community up to about 15 or 20 homes. So we've worked with this group for a long time in terms of finding the land and finding the right place for them, because a big part of what they want to do is grow their own food. So, you know, we're having to find not just a development site, but we're always having to find enough space for them to do that as well. So yeah, I mean, it's very much around the development side of it is very much around the concept of mutual home ownership. So it's kind of like, it's a cooperative, so it's like a holding company, if you like, where it's owned by one company, but everyone owns a share of that company. And the premise of this is that you're enabling people who might have less money than others to kind of come in and still have the same in terms of like the ability to make decisions, but people who put more money in, it's like economic diversity, really. People who put more money in just get more shares, just like a traditional company. But it doesn't mean that they get more kind of rights just because they put more money in. So yeah, the farm purchase is quite a complex one, but in terms of what a normal property developer would do, it's very much the same. You know, we're just kind of bringing these different relationships into the mix.
Right. Got it. And with that group, I mean, how does it actually start? Does a group normally get together and then get in contact with you, or how?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So we have two ways of doing this. We do a lot of marketing to kind of bring people to the sort of top level vision of, you know, the housing crisis or this isolation or loneliness they might be feeling, or kind of being more eco-conscious, but not being stuck in the system and not feeling like they can do anything. So we have a very particular process where we bring people in and kind of help them to really look at their own situation, which is really important. So it's kind of like what you or I need could be very different. But then it's how we integrate that into like a community blueprint, if you like, you know, a community vision. So we generally support people in that initial process to come together, to have conversations. We do that through our Rethink community. And there's really kind of like set modules and set ways that we help people kind of think against the conventional approach to doing this. So we help people and ask the right questions. But at the same time, you know, we work with a group who've already formulated this idea themselves, and we're happy to kind of come in and help facilitate that. So it's kind of a mix of the two, really. But our number one kind of main way is to bring people into the process, help them see that this is possible, which is the hardest part. And then once we've got them in that position, we then help them go out and find their own people that they know, and bring them into the process. Or we kind of, it's essentially like a matchmaking service where we then put people together who've got similar visions and start that conversation.
Right. So we got a collective of, say, 10, 15 people who want to live, grow their own food, maybe a little bit off grid, that sort of thing, and very environmentally friendly. And then you're sort of like the guide then for that journey, how to raise finance, how to deal with a developer, builders, etc. That's basically you're helping them, basically holding their hand through that whole, from finding land and the people to do it with, through to actually the completed development.
Yeah, exactly that. It's kind of a really, I suppose a way of saying it is that we're kind of commercializing the consumer. You know, we're helping them be like a developer, so they take the right decisions at the right time. What we found very early on in doing this work is that groups asked when they did this purely community led, when they just really sort of got together and did it on their own, what we found is that kind of groups burnt out. You know, individuals put more time in than others. There was this real kind of burnout that happened with people just, you know, they're working, they've got their own family and their own lives, and then they're trying to be a property developer at the same time. You know, that mix of having to put so much effort in and so much time in, really, we saw a lot where people just burn out, and that was the end of it. So what we did really is formulate everything we do like this around co-production, which is where people, professionals, kind of come together. You know, so one isn't above the other. It's kind of like this combined effort. But obviously the professional approach is to make sure that you're doing it in the right way, and to making the right decision and taking the right steps, rather than just thinking, well, we should do this or we should do that. You know, obviously you got to find land first, but a lot of groups spend a lot of time on the vision, or, you know, doing other things rather than just focusing on, let's find the land or the building. So we've really kind of adopted the sort of standard professional approaches and kind of journeys that people take, and just kind of put that around a group process.
Right. I must admit to the idea of building a house or even a development of houses, if somebody hasn't got any background in that at all, must be, oh my God, where do we even start? An amazing dream, but I imagine, yeah, how most people even get to the start line is difficult.
Exactly that, and I think this is, I mean, for me, the community-led housing sector is a movement that was really kind of born out of the 2008 crash. You know, a lot of people through that process kind of started to come together to do this themselves, and over the years, you know, they found, like you say, how difficult it actually is. Now, for me personally, you know, I don't think community-led housing can scale on its own. I think there's a place for it as a choice in the market. And I think people, in my opinion, should be part of housing development. You know, they're the people who are going to live in these places. They should have a voice. They should be, you know, they should say what's needed, not what the developer thinks they need. But for most people, the thought of going through this process because of, you know, grand designs or all these different property programs that show how hard it is, I think, you know, I think you're right, it would put most people off. So it's really a niche sector of people at the moment who are really passionate about, well, number one, they kind of can't get what they want in the market. So to, you know, that's a big barrier for them. So they make these choices. But I think for the mainstream of people at the moment, I don't think they do this, just like they wouldn't do a self-build. So really what I think companies like us can do in this role is to make it just a lot easier. So you're making choices, not big decisions, you know, and I think that customization is enough for a lot of people. But at the moment, the only real option is effectively self-build or group self-build or, you know, renovate yourself. So really what we're trying to do is kind of take on that burden of development and really help people to get involved in projects like this when they never thought they would.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine loads of people dream about this, but yeah,
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's it. I think, you know, if we look in other parts of Europe as an example, you know, this kind of self-build, cooperative, kind of community owned, it's like 30 to 40% of housing stock in those countries. You know, it's kind of like a norm, you know, it's just, it happens, it's got a place, it's got people who help you do it. The UK is a little bit behind on that. There's a lot of kind of good stuff happening. But I think, yeah, I think the kind of the real weight of can we actually do this for most people is too much. And even people who start this, you know, who get to a certain point where it's too much, you know, you know, the idea of, you know, getting to the end and it being 2, 3, 4, 5 years is too much for people. So yeah, that's a big part of what we want to do, is really kind of enable people to come into the process further down the line when things are a bit more tangible, a bit more real. And that's what we're trying to do anyway.
got you. No, so as you say, because at the moment, developers are about making money, and yeah, I'm sure there's corners that they'll cut because at the end of the day, that's their business. Are there any sort of like key examples you can give of the difference between the sort of developments you're getting involved in with people compared to what a developer would put out there?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question, and I think ultimately it comes down to, you know, the cost of living, you know, the kind of future proofing. So, you know, for people who are going into this, not only are they going to want to have the space designed how they want it or need it, you know, it's really kind of that, a big part of it is the eco side of it. But I think what we found in the last 3 or 4 years the more people we've spoken to, and especially people kind of like, you know, sort of not at retirement home stage, people who are really thinking of what's going to happen in the future. They're really trying to future-proof that they're living in a place where they feel safe and supported. And I think for our kind of aging population, you know, 55 plus, that idea of being in a really kind of connected community where people are looking out for you, where you see people daily, where you don't feel kind of lonely or isolated, they're the big drivers for people right now in this type of living. So I think that the main differences, you know, on that basis are kind of communal spaces, both internal and external. So, you know, like in co-housing, you will always have a community house, and that community house would probably have a shared kitchen and dining space where you could have some meals, you know, a lounge, some guest bedrooms. So you don't need that extra bedroom that you use 3 times a year. You know, if people want to come and stay with you, there's space for them. And there's just that real kind of central hub to the community. Now, obviously, for a developer, that's probably lost profit. But for people who are kind of going in this together, that amenity space is a real added value. And then things like storage, you know, maybe a big thing in co-housing is having a kind of shared tool shed. So you don't have, you know, 10 mowers, you've got maybe 4 mowers, because you know, who needs a mower all at the same time, you know, and just those little kind of little nuances that kind of save space but enable more sharing is really what people who want this type of living are looking for.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, actually. It's funny because I've been thinking and focusing on the property, but it's actually the people that are in the community is so key in this, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, you know, from a property kind of investor or developer sense, a lot of them, that kind of market see this as difficult, or something that they probably don't want to necessarily get involved in, because maybe they think the complexities of working with the group are too much. But actually, I think for the construction and property sector, what's most interesting from where I've come from a financial perspective, is that when you've got a group of people who are kind of this emotionally and financially invested, that, you know, they're there at the beginning, it's like selling to them off plan. You know, it's like they're there and they're ready to buy the moment it's built. There's no period in between where you're trying to sell your properties. The group of people are there, you know, and they've helped you formulate something that is really kind of desirable and that they really want. And I think that for a lot of developers, they don't see that angle. But yeah, the community of people really is the key to it, you know, and I think that's why don't want to create these gated communities, and you know, these communities need to be outward looking. But it's really important for, I think, in the future of neighborhoods, for people to have this connection through community, because it's lost, you know, from the years I was growing up. You know, we used to play in the street, you used to know everybody. You know, now life is really fast paced, and you can go 10 years of living in a place and not know everybody. Maybe some people want that, and that's okay. But I think what we're trying to do is see that actually there's a load of people who want something different, and to try and provide that choice.
Yep, no, I'm loving it. And is there a sort of like a typical individual you deal with? I'm just intrigued about age groups actually as well. Yeah, is there a standard person you deal with?
At the moment, I would say the majority of people who already know about this are the kind of family to later living sort of age group. So I'd probably say 40, you know, plus. But I think in the co-living element and that kind of nomadic or transient life that a lot of young people have, co-living is a real, it's new, and it's something that's coming on more and more. I mean, it's not completely new, but I think the idea of a group or a smaller group of people living together, I think what it gives people is that ability to move on if they need to. You're not, the society's changed in that people just sort of, don't stay deep rooted in one community or one city, and they move around. So I think on that basis, there's so much opportunity for younger people to take control of this type of living, and it really fits with their type of lifestyle, that they might, move jobs or suddenly want to move work from home or whatever it might be. So I think, in reality, it's the family and plus that we work with more, but there is definitely a market for younger people.
I imagine they're quite different markets, as you say, with your 40 plus, with a family, you're looking more long term, whereas you say the younger generation, by nature of jobs, etc., are going to be a bit more transient. They're virtually like two different camps type thing.
Yeah. I think we've worked quite hard on this, on trying to look at what those products are, and I think there is more of a kind of the kind of urban product around these type of living is very, very different to rural. We have, and suburban, but I think what's quite interesting in the more kind of suburban and rural stuff is that kind of intergenerational thing. There's been quite a lot of studies that have gone on where, kind of younger people living with older people and how it helps their kind of mental health and well-being both ways. I think there's a lot in there where we don't just want to create places that they're just for older people, they're just for families, they're just for younger people. It's really about, there's plenty of people I know now who older who want to live in the city because there's so much for them to do. Whereas, the thought of living in the city for my mum and dad is like, something that they just wouldn't even consider. So really, I think it's about being able to create that intergenerational community if it's needed. There's some people who just want to live kind of with their own age group. But I think there's something there in this kind of ability to have the transient and the ability to have, people who are more settled there, and that helps kind of deep root the community.
Oh, yeah. And have you seen any changes over the last few years in the market? Is it something that's increasing in focus, should we say, or how's things changed over the last few years you've been working in this market?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, to think kind of post-COVID. I think more and more people probably see this as something that they would consider, whereas pre-COVID, the idea of not commuting and always, all that stuff that suddenly stopped, and then we were able to kind of reassess our lives. I think for a big percentage of people, it wouldn't be such a terrible thing to live in a co-housing community. Whereas, before COVID, I think a lot of people probably would have not considered it as much. And that whole being in your home all the time, the need for places to be, was kind of, really evident, in terms of how people were living through the kind of pandemic. So, I think that has definitely shifted mentality quite a lot. And we've for sure spoken to more people whose perception changed of this type of living, or just didn't know it existed, and have seen something we've posted, and suddenly like, well, yeah, this is exactly what I need. I work from home more now. I need a different type of lifestyle. I think that's the slower moving part of this. You've still got people who just get it and understand it, and then there's people who are just really unsure. And I think the only way that we can help people make better decisions is to create more of these projects, and that's when people see it more kind of locally, and they're more and more popping up for sure. I think there's 19 or 20 co-housing communities in the UK, but if you look on Co-housing UK website, there's probably in the late 10, 50, 60, 70 developing groups. It's just how close they'll get to actually completing. But it's definitely something that's growing and growing more and more.
Right. Yeah, I can see with the whole post-COVID, that whole sense of community, mental health issues that came out of it. Yeah, making it much more desirable to live within a community. And I think that's probably questioned a lot of people after COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. It did for me. I was for sure kind of working on this stuff, but at the same time, I was like, is it right for us as a family? But I think through that period, it was definitely something that I saw a real kind of a real relevance to it because of the situation we were in through the pandemic. So yeah, I think it's hopefully some good came out of the pandemic for that for that purpose.
It got people thinking and talking about this sort of stuff a lot more, which I think is always a good thing.
Yeah, well, I think what happened quite quickly through the pandemic period is you realized you didn't actually know who your neighbor was. So, all of a sudden there's this kind of need to support and look after and connect. And there was so much that came out of that in a good way. But I think it's really easy to slip back to how it used to be because everyone just gets, busy again, and that pace of life like really pushes on. And I think, actually this kind of living is really about a slower pace. If you're able to kind of control your work environment, and really kind of not be in that rat race of kind of needing to commute every day, you can slow your life down. But what co-housing does as an intentional community, it enables you to take some of that pressure off, and really kind of live with people who are trying to slow down at the same to the same sort of pace. Because if you're trying to slow down but everyone else is rushing around, that's really difficult. So actually these type of communities really help people who are already thinking about that, and it really just clicks that this is a way of living that's possible. So yeah, the slower good life, I suppose, if everyone remembers the good life.
I do indeed, actually.
Me too.
A couple of days ago made total sense to me, actually. If you want a recipe for unhappiness, make as much money as you possibly can and let your relationships and health deteriorate.
Yeah, there you go. That's so true, isn't it? And it's so true. And you hear it more and more and more in this kind of buzz around entrepreneurship, that people are trying to achieve this big goal, which is largely money, and they get there and they realize they've got no one to enjoy it with. So yeah, I think community and what community brings, it can sound really kind of woo-woo hippie, but actually community can be just whatever you want it to be. It can just be a group of households who, share stuff, might share a car, might, be partly off grid and create your own energy and just help each other do the school run and, look out for each other. Or it can be really intentional and you can have, regular meals together, you can really connect, you can do more together. So your definition of community is not something we would prescribe. It's what you prescribe for yourselves, and I think that's part of that lifestyle that you crave and want, and you can design that.
I was going to say, yeah, and depending on the community you're talking to, I imagine some of the wishes can be quite different, actually.
100%. I think that's for what we do. That actually, when you get to the fine detail of this, is the most kind of is the most exciting part of it. Actually, is that the big vision is usually quite similar. There's quite regenerative or sustainable communities they want to be, but actually when you take some of the layers off and actually get to the fine detail, they're very, very different, very different. And it can be for all levels of income, or it can be a combination of, that there's really that creativity in the design of the community all based on the people who join the community. That's really what it comes down to. And that's the big difference to the developer model. You know, those people are designing community around the buildings, and then it all kind of integrates as one.
I'm intrigued because you're obviously very passionate about the whole thing. Where are the bits that you really get the buzz out of all of this? It's easy just to think once the community is all set up and it's finished and great. Where are your highlights during that journey?
That's a good question. Don't think I've really thought of that properly. I think it's I think the thing that really inspires me in this is that kind of challenging the conventional approach. It's kind of like a bit cliche to say disruptor these days, but you know, really about how a group of people can, you know, do something that they never thought possible. And I think a big part of that is where I come into it around the financial element of this, is that people generally think that part of it, the financing, is hard. And I think if the project and the group come together and kind of really have this kind of collective organization, it's just a normal property deal. So the same rules apply like if you were just going to go and get a mortgage. You know, you definitely need to put some money in, but ultimately the kind of whole market is out there for you as a group of people. You know, a group of people who have their own homes. So for me, it's kind of simplifying and helping people simplify what might be the most challenging parts, or what they might think are the most challenging parts. So that's where I really get, you know, the buzz. And I think just seeing people like actually make the steps and move forward is a big thing, because so many of these groups get stuck. So actually kind of freeing them out of the mud and being able to kind of push on and make big decisions is really a good part of the job.
Oh, yeah. And are there any sort of like key misconceptions or mistakes people have that you deal with?
Yeah, the number one misconception is that people think it's a hippie commune. So it's definitely not a hippie commune, but there's a lot of good elements of the hippie commune that have kind of been brought into this model. But yeah, I think anytime I explain what we do, people are always just like, "Oh, that's a hippie commune." And it's like, well, not quite, but it's definitely got elements of it. And I think the main misconception from a lot of people would be this feeling of not having your own space. So I think even though you're living in something which, you know, is contained, is like it's built or designed in a way for interaction, you know, the real kind of skill with the architects we bring in and the people that we work with is about creating that sense of space. And that is generally, you know, that can be found both in your own home or in your own room, or in an amenity shared space, or, you know, in pockets of green space or outdoor spaces where, you know, you can have your own space and be away from the community and live your own life. So it's really not like a kind of like hippie commune where you do everything together. You know, it's about you running your own life, but in an outward looking communal way.
Right, got ya. Yeah. It could be a hippie commune as well, but if people aren't into that, draw the good bits of that, and it's whatever they want the community to look like, really, I suppose, isn't it?
100%. And I think that's the key. I think that, you know, we said it before, it really is about, you know, what you want to design. You know, and that's a big part of our process, is that the kind of co-production model, you know, is co-create, co-design, co-fund, and then you co-build community together. So it's really about going through those steps to kind of create and design something that, you know, is personal to you as a group of people, but that also has the I suppose the flexibility or the ability to kind of grow with generations. You know, it's not just for you and then nobody else. You know, we've got to think about what works for different people at different times. But at the same time, you know, it's yours at the beginning. So, you know, it has to be customized to how you want to live. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Mm. So what are the biggest challenges you find in your role at the moment then?
I think the main challenges are probably the same as what most developers come across. It's finding land. It's finding land that is finding land that is obviously developable, but where a landowner doesn't value it too high. You know, I think from our perspective, the same challenges are what most developers come across. You know, the need for some planning reform, you know, the need for cheaper land, you know, all of that stuff has spiraled at whatever market you're in. And I think the hardest part for what we do is, you know, it's really difficult to be in competition with a purely profit-driven developer, because we'll probably lose, you know, on the fact that our profit margins are less. So we're trying to fit something in. But I think at the same time, that actually, and this is something that, you know, is an ongoing process for us in terms of the work we do, is how we work with local communities to prove to them that this approach actually, you know, of having a smaller housing development that is communal and outward looking and, you know, grows food and might power its own energy, is much better than having, you know, a purely kind of red box developer at the end who just want to kind of pack them and stack them. So I think, you know, I think that community engagement is key for us. You know, we don't kind of go through a planning process and then ask the community what they think. You know, we definitely turn up and engage with the community very early on to make sure that we can, you know, create that relationship. And I think that's a key part of community-led housing, is that because it's really driven by people, there can be an ability to kind of remove objections through the planning process. And that's a big part of it. So that is, you know, there's challenges, but I think we also have that as an opportunity.
I can totally understand the development challenges, finding the land, etc. In the same way developers are having challenges at the moment. I was just wondering, but working with the community side of things, is part of your challenge getting the message out there more, or are there far too many communities you can deal with? Do you see an educational challenge as well, or is that already there and there is already a demand?
No, I don't think there's enough demand. I think I think the biggest challenge is the educational piece, is people really seeing that this is something that they want or need, and that it isn't, you know, this kind of perceived commune. Because you know, once people kind of tip over that edge to, oh, okay, right, I see what it is now, you know, they really start to fall into that kind of awareness of, you know, how this is a housing solution can really help the problems that might exist in their lives. So I think, you know, the really early stage educational part is a big part of it, yeah. And I think the kind of need for more of these projects to happen and get through, you know, is a big part of our job, and being able to get to that point. But yeah, I think that mirrored with, you know, actually, you know, the other side, the other side of what we like to do in the educational piece is the professional side, is really kind of engage with more professionals, with more developers, you know, who might have you know, more land opportunities or more initial finance, to be able to kind of bring the two together and facilitate this to happen. So we don't just develop stuff that actually could be developed as really good co-housing or co-living. You know, if we've got the people and they've got the land or buildings, then, you know, a conversation to bring the two together. that's probably like a bit of a personal project for me, because I think there's a real sense of how that could work.
Yeah, I was intrigued to ask actually what your view of developers are. Is it, oh my God, they're evil, I need to, or are you actually trying to work with them more by the sound of things?
Yeah, that, you know, what I do know from my background in finance and now my current kind of reality of, you know, working, my current reality of having to kind of go through the land and planning process is there's no way I think developers are evil. They're just, you know, they're trying to earn a living, you know, and I think the challenges that a developer goes through, you know, that just to get planning could take 3 to 5 years, you know, they're spending money, not earning money through that process. So I totally see both sides of it. I don't have a lot of good things to say about the kind of volume side of things. I think they get it too easy, and they've obviously got deeper pockets and they don't really add any value. That's those type of developers. I think, you know, those type of house builders, it's probably better to have the conversation off camera. But, you know, I don't think many people really see or value those schemes if it was compared to a lot of smaller schemes that had more kind of eco credentials and created better communities, especially in, you know, kind of rural villages where, you know, 1,000+ houses are dumped on them when they haven't got the infrastructure to deal with that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real challenge there. You know, there's that kind of big business in any sector. There's big business that can kind of control a lot of things, whereas the SMEs are sort of left in the middle to try and make a decent living. And most of us are trying to do the right thing. You know, we just might have a different purpose or a different vision of what we want, but I think it all fits together. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is create this kind of co-housing, community-led approach to have its kind of smallish kind of piece of the market. You know, it's a choice for people, you know, rather than go on Rightmove and just see all of this. You know, if you want this, you know where to go and get it. And that's kind of like where I'd like us to go, you know, in our next however many years. It's about edging closer to where people know what it is and can choose it if they want it.
Got you. Yeah. Oh, that makes total sense. The actual, sorry, I just thought the actual build, because do you normally actually get professional builders and developers in it? Because one idea went through my mind is, oh, does everybody get together and actually physically build these houses themselves? Is that just
No, there have been some group kind of DIY self-builds, and I think there are some projects and some kind of community organizations that do that. One's just popped to mind, but I can't remember it. But no, the idea is that the group of people kind of co-creating, kind of co-design with the architect and the kind of engineers, and then you would tender it out to the majority of these types of builds are looking to kind of off-site construction or modern methods rather than traditional build, just because they want that kind of speed and energy efficiency. But yeah, the main kind of bulk of this type of development is tendered out to people.
right? Yeah, I was going to say that group coming together to try and build a house. It sounds lovely, but I imagine that's even more challenging.
Imagine it. Or living on site on it in a caravan, that'd be terrible, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's
So how do you see the future developing in this market in the UK?
I think there's a lot in the UK. I think there's a lot of good stuff happening. You know, the Co-Housing UK, Community Land Trusts, Housing Co-op, Confederation of Housing Cooperatives are all doing kind of amazing work. And I think for us in what we do, you know, we've kind of positioned ourselves as, you know, the more of a like a developer-led kind of community approach. So it's what I'd like to see is more kind of professional developers see this as an opportunity. You know, start again. It wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, there's more competition, because I think more competition in this space is actually needed. You know, I think what we actually want to see, or I would like to see, is more kind of developers or new developers, younger developers, seeing this as an approach that actually is a valuable way to kind of build more houses that we need. So I'm hopeful that's going to happen. I'm really hopeful, because I think you just see on social media more and more kind of, you know, people who've maybe an architect or a build company who've done a project with one of these type of projects, and suddenly see that value, and then kind of really make sure that that's their way of doing it in the future. But we need more people, you know, everyone needs more money in terms of the early stage stuff. And I think it's just about this kind of message kind of moving up in the education piece, which will enable that to happen.
I was going to say, I mean, you've educated me today in this, and I could have much doing this, and a lot more attractive than I originally expected before this call, if I'm totally honest with you. Didn't quite totally get it. So yeah, loving the idea. And if somebody catches some of these videos and like, oh, really interested in that, where would you put, what would be their next steps?
Next step would be we've got quite a lot of kind of content on our website, affairofsociety.com, rethinkhomes.co.uk, really just to consume as much information that's out there. There's loads of videos, both from us and other people on this stuff, is to get that base level of what's happened today, you know, with yourself, is to actually like open your mind to something you never knew was really a thing. That's the first step. And then come and join us, you know, come and join in. There's really kind of easy, kind of cheap and free kind of steps you can take to, it's really about shifting the kind of mindset of what this actually entails and what's involved, how you put it all together to really kind of get rid of those kind of inhibitions of, is this possible? Why would I want to do this? All of that stuff. Because there's so many examples worldwide where this is a reality, that all we need to do is just kind of formulate it around what you need. And that's a big part of what we do in our Rethink community, which is about bringing people together and a kind of safe space for you to explore this stuff. You know, what we find is that a lot of people might be a husband or a wife are really interested in this, and they kind of start the process, and then, you know, there's an element of needing then to bring the partner or husband or wife in. So that's usually a thing that happens. So, you know, could come and learn more, and we'll help you convince your partner that this is the right thing.
I imagine normally there's one partner is more into it than the other. It takes a little bit.
Well, usually at the early stages, because the other partner's like, as if I've got time for this. So yeah, I think, you know, that's a big part of obviously our sell, is that we're trying to do the heavy lifting for you. We don't want you to, unless you really want to, you don't have to learn how to be a house builder or developer. You know, we'll guide you through the process. We'll help you kind of navigate it, and then you make the decisions and the choices that are needed at that time, rather than learn it, do it, make decisions, which, you know, is heavy work. So yeah, you know, I think if people can see that this is something that they want, then I think the developer-led approach of creating community is the best way for them.
When you explain it, it makes so much more sense. That just why wouldn't you live within your community and know your community and share? And yeah, I'm a little bit, why would we do it differently? Why wouldn't we do it all like that?
It's so interesting, isn't it? And I think I just don't think there's I don't think there's a simple answer for it, really. I think it's, do you know what? And I think this kind of, this type of thinking and idea has just become alien. And I don't want to kind of harp on about it too much, because of the kind of big corporate businesses, you know, the big, you know, they kind of dominate most of our kind of society, really. But, you know, the cooperative model, like that we use, it's a legal model. It's one of the oldest legal models there is. You know, it's back into the 1800s that it was started to be used. So, you know, this idea of people coming together is not new. You know, it's there. It's been there forever, really. We've just
For the last 50, 100 years or whatever.
Sorry, say that again.
You've actually been moving away from that idea of community over the last century or two, I would have thought.
Exactly, you know, exactly. And I think that's, you know, I think that's just why it becomes quite alien to people when they first start speaking about it, because in your lifetime, you're unlikely to have known that this stuff existed. But there's so many businesses worldwide that are, you know, this cooperative approach. That, yeah, it's, why wouldn't you want to control and make decisions about your life or your work or where you live, if you could, you know, and it wasn't huge amounts of extra work, you know, for many people, that's a positive thing. For a lot of people, they like stuff and they just like the familiarity of what's going on. But I think, yeah, I think what we're seeing more and more is the younger generation, whilst we don't work with a lot of them at the moment, the younger generation want that control. So yeah, they don't trust what's gone on. So they want to take back control. So yeah, that's not a bad thing for us.
Yep, no, it makes total sense. Yeah, yeah, I love what you do with the Fairer Society. It makes so much sense to me. Yeah, been really good chatting to you about it.
And you, Dave, and we've got a new convert, so I'll be signing you up later when we finish this call.
No, but honestly, I didn't quite understand it before this call, but now I'm converted. Why wouldn't everybody think like this?
Brilliant. We have another advocate, another follower. That's what we like.
Indeed. Well, Peter, thank you so much for your time. It's been really good chatting to you, and yeah, best of luck for the future. And yeah, I think you're doing an amazing thing.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Cool. Good talking to you. Cheers.